This is 3ABN Now with John and Rosemary Malkovich.
Hello, welcome to today's program. We know that you're going to enjoy this, don't we, John?
Yes, we do.
We're talking about God answering prayers and working miracles. And we have a couple here with us from New Zealand originally, Bruce and Maxine Hill. It's really good to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And we're going to listen to your story today. And I know the people at home are going to enjoy this. So sit down, get yourself relaxed, and listen to what God can do in people's lives. And if you're going through a difficult time today, this may be just what you need to give you some revival and some encouragement. So be with us as we sit and talk with Bruce and Maxine. And John's got Bruce's Bible verse.
Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10. And I like this text, and I'm sure you will. It says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." Now that's a beautiful text to show us that God's really there for us, isn't he, Bruce? Absolutely. And he's there to do anything possible to help us. Tell us why this text you've chosen is one of your favourites.
Well, I think as we get into our story, it'll probably make more sense why I've chosen that today. Because God is with us. Sometimes even when we don't realise it, he's there. He's never away from us at all.
Yeah, we don't know what's coming tomorrow, do we? And I know you don't know, except God does. And if we've got God as our basis for what we believe and trust in him, there's nothing to worry about, even though bad things can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, God gets us through them if we hold on, and he guides us. Now, Maxine, you have chosen Jeremiah 29 verse 11, another beautiful and very well-known verse. I really like this one too. "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." That sort of goes a little bit with Isaiah 41:10 in its own way. So why is that a verse that you've chosen?
Because it's been a text that I carried in my back pocket when I first came to Crosslands. It got me through periods of isolation, all of those really negative times where I'd be up at midnight cleaning by myself, and I would be challenging God, and I had it in my back pocket for a couple of years. There's a bit of a story that goes with it, and a few years later, in fact only a year or so ago, a client bought me that plaque, and I had to tell them the story behind it up to that point, because it's an interesting story.
So how did it get into your back pocket?
It was on a card. I don't even know how I got it in the beginning, but every day it was in my pocket, and I'd pull it out and I'd have tears running down my face, and I know the plans I have for you, and I would repeat it over and over again. And so, yeah, it was like that, and then it wore out.
I'm not surprised.
Because I've got a card like that I carry in my wallet. But, you know, I mean, it must have been a challenge. You were in business both together, which we're going to hear about, and you leave New Zealand to come to Australia. Was that a hard decision? Was that...
No, I don't believe it was a hard decision, because as you'll hear later, we have no doubt whatsoever that God was involved in that decision. So we fully trusted that was what was meant to happen.
But then after you get here, you sort of think, did we actually hear God? Did we do our own thing?
And that's normal, you know, that's normal, because everybody thinks that once you become a Christian, life's a bed of roses, you know. But the reality is there are briars amongst it.
I think if life was a bed of roses, more people would become Christians. Because they'd say, I want a bed of roses too, because everything's good and sunny for a Christian, and I want good and sunny. But as a Christian, you actually can have more trials than a non-Christian in many cases. So, Bruce, I want to get going into your background. Can you run that by us?
It would start, I guess, 10 years before I was born. My parents, my father was an alcoholic, not Christian, obviously. He drank and smoked. I heard from I have 2 older sisters. I heard from them that my parents' marriage was probably about to break up. They used to drink and have parties on the weekend, and my father was an engineer, worked at a welding workshop, quite a big welding workshop. One day he was rolling a cigarette and he heard a voice speak to him. Now, unfortunately, my father's dead now, so I can't confirm exactly the words that he heard, but they were to the effect that if you don't stop drinking and smoking, you're going to die, and that's going to be the end, type thing. So he heard that voice. He said it was clear as a bell. This is in a noisy engineering workshop. He stopped, looked around. No one was anywhere near him. So he then went around all the other guys and told them what happened. They all thought he was silly, as you would. He went and told one particular man, his name was Heck Harvey, obviously from Invercargill, where we were from in New Zealand. Heck Harvey was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he said, well, if you're going to stop drinking and smoking, you probably need to go to church. And he invited him to his church. And so that's where it all began. Dad went to church. He went home, told Mum what had happened. Apparently they ended up having a fight because Dad poured all out his alcohol down the sink, burned his cigarettes, and she threw her cigarettes at him and told him to do the same. And so that's where it all began.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And they stayed dry and...
Yeah, they never drunk, smoked. Apparently their friends came around the following weekend for a party and they said, no, we're not drinking, smoking anymore. And so they left.
So your mum joined in?
Yeah.
That's
Excellent.
amazing. Yeah.
And so that's why your sisters had to tell you, because you never experienced it.
No, I didn't know about that. I just heard about it growing up. Yeah.
Well, that's really a change in a life, And I think if you give your lives to the Lord, the same experience can be yours too. That when we decide to follow, because that's really what they decided to do, to give it all up and then to live a different life, and that's what Christianity is about. It's offering a better life, and that's a very interesting story.
So then you were born?
Yeah, I was born at the age of 8 years old. My parents, obviously at this time, they wanted a better life for their family. And so we moved. We lived in Invercargill city itself. And my parents moved us as a family to Riverton, which is a little fishing village, for a better life, basically. And it was. I always say to people, I grew up in Disneyland.
Well, yeah, I was wondering about that, because on your paperwork you say you grew up in Disneyland.
And it was.
And
to me,
I thought, is there a place in New Zealand called Disneyland?
No, it was Riverton, as I said, a little fishing village. But, life growing up was just amazing. I never dreamed or wanted to go to places like Disneyland because I lived there. We would go, obviously, school during the day, but after school, I'd come home, we would go surfing because we lived just a couple of 100 metres from the beach. If there was no surf, I had a little P-class yacht and we'd go sailing. If I wasn't doing that, we were building skateboards and bikes and everything and riding go-karts down the hill. And, I had a possum traps in the bush, and it was just magic growing up.
I can relate to that, Bruce, too, because that's the sort of life I grew up, and it really is.
In the country.
I think we're really blessed because we had a good childhood. My dad drank, he wasn't a Christian, and my mum, she was a very caring mum and a loving mum. But, despite all that, we had a terrific life as kids. There was no drugs There was none of this stuff that goes on today for kids. There was no computers or mobile phones too. We had to invent our own things, but it was a real fantastic young time in my life that I always look back to and think, boy, I wish all kids could experience this.
So life was balanced too. I mean, as I was saying, it wasn't all about fun. Growing up, we had chores, obviously. You know, we used to have this big garden of vegetables that, you know, looking back, it was probably not as big as what it was in my mind, but I used to have to...
It was big.
Yeah, well, it felt like a whole paddock, you know.
Yeah.
But I had to rotary hoe that growing up, you know, mow the lawns every Friday night. It was my job to bring the coal buckets in for Sabbath and polish everyone's shoes for church the next day. So, yeah, we had our jobs as well. But
That's excellent.
Excellent.
So, Maxine, what was your background?
My parents were both working parents. So my mum was a meat worker, and she would leave pretty much for work before we were even up, and then she would come home around dinner time. Yeah, they both worked. We were middle class, working class family. My parents didn't attend church. They were very social. My brother and I went to church from when I was the age of 2 every week. Didn't matter where you were in the country, you had to be home for church. My parents didn't go, so you know that was the weird thing about it.
So who did you go with?
I went with my uncle who lived in the same street at my grandparents' house, and so I went to, it was an Open Brethren church, so I went there until I started work at the age of 15. I probably stopped going there around 16. I met Bruce just before then, so I started hanging out with Adventist youth.
So when you look back at your childhood, you know, Bruce said he was in Disneyland. How did you find your experience? Because it's good to know, because, you know, you ended up you're now married for 41 years, so there must have been something. But what was your early experience? What recollections do you have?
I remember work before play.
Okay.
And I don't remember a whole lot of play.
Was there a lot of strictness in your home?
My parents were really strict. My father was quite a hard man. My mother was really strict because I think she was strict because she was protective. She was always big on the good girl thing.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with that at all. You know, and I guess environmentally she had things to protect me from. And so, yeah, I can't complain.
So did Bruce sweep you off your feet?
He actually, I met him because he was going out with my girlfriend's sister at the time. Okay. But it wasn't a thing, it was just, I don't know, eventually we just dated.
Well, that's how it starts. You make a friendship and it grows from there, and that's how it really should be too, you know. Friendship's a good way to start and to grow on that. So when we...
Friendship's a good way to start. So we knew each other for 2.5 months, then he moved overseas, and 8 months later I moved over and we got married the next day.
Oh, wow.
So, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Circumstances are different for everybody. But so you said you were how old when you got married? 19? 19. Yeah. And so where did you get married, Bruce? Where?
We were married in the Invercargill Seventh-day Adventist Church. Yeah. And so when you got married, what did you decide to do? Now you're husband and wife. What did you embark? Where did you go? What did you do? We stayed in Invercargill for our entire life until we moved over here.
Is that right?
Yeah. We thought we were going to be there forever.
They didn't just go to the next town.
No. Fantastic.
Didn't just move up the coast further.
No, we thought we would die there.
Is that right?
You can't go much further south than Invercargill.
Next stop's Antarctica. So.
No, Stewart Island, isn't it?
Yeah, Stewart Island.
Yeah.
You know, that's interesting because a lot of people, we're so mobile in the world today, you know, nobody stays in the same place. But there is something nice about staying in the same place, isn't there? You know the people. Is that an advantage for you? Did you think that was an advantage now, looking back?
Absolutely. You know, when I compare my life in Invercargill, New Zealand to Sydney, I even say to my daughter, you know, just even after school things, we would do singing, piano, ballet, all in a single day. It's just that to me now is just how it's not even feasible. You know, how do you get around? I notice when people go to the doctor from work, you don't see them for the rest of the day. It's just, it was 10 minutes to everywhere for us. And, you know, like, because New Zealand obviously is a small country, 2 hours to anywhere different. You know, like you can travel 12 hours in Australia and just nothing changes.
That's right.
Well, you can travel for a whole day, you know, for 24 hours basically in West Australia, and you can still be in the same state.
Exactly.
And it's not because your car's broken down.
Yeah. And there's this thing that I know that Bruce has experienced it with Crosslands. It's like when you grow up in a single place and it's a small place, you know everybody. So if something goes wrong, you've always got somebody you can call on to help, whether it be a plumber or an electrician or anything. They're there just like that.
That's
So
right.
Crosslands, we're going to talk about later on, is where you're working now, and you left New Zealand to come to be at Crosslands.
Now, I was just going to say, you had 3 children, or you have 3 children.
Yes.
2 boys?
Yes.
And a girl? Okay then, got that right. And you are a medal-winning hairdresser, at least you were, when you did hairdressing. So that's pretty up there with hairdressing.
Oh, that's competition work, you know, you work hard and hope that you'll achieve the best.
And you did.
Yeah.
So that was really good. And you worked in an office equipment.
Yeah, I grew, well, before I even started work, I always had an interest in electronics, and I wanted to be a technician. So I worked my way up. I actually started at a company called NCR Computers and Terminals. It's a big American company. I worked there for, I think it was 5 years. And then a office equipment company was starting up in Invercargill, and they come and headhunted me, and I was then their service manager. It was a great job. We serviced all sorts of stuff like banking ATMs, and in those days, if anyone can remember checks, we had check and coding machines. I installed the very first 1-hour film processor in New Zealand. And after that, I used to fly all around the country repairing and installing photo processors. So yeah, it was a really good job until one day I got fired. Yeah. What happened was the company that I worked for were obviously experiencing some difficulties. They employed the services of a financial advisor. They called me into the office and said, we're going to have to let one of my technicians go, a young guy that we had employed. And from memory, he was on the princely sum of $120 a week in those days. And they were going to save the company by saving $120 a week by letting him go. My argument was, I said, you've got to remember why we employed him, because we were going to lose, we had a Casio agency, and we were going to lose that agency because we weren't able to keep up with the work. And when we employed this young boy, it enabled us to keep up with the work. So I reminded them of that, and I said, I feel really strongly about your decision. I said, if you go ahead with that, then you're going to have to find someone else to do my job as well, because I know what we would go back to. They said, oh, remember the loyalty to the company and all this sort of thing. And they said, you go home and think about it and give us your decision tomorrow. I went home, come back the next day. They asked me what my decision was. I said, nothing's changed. And they said, well, it has actually. Give us the keys to your car. You're out of here. So they sacked me.
Sacked you for standing up for someone else.
Yeah. So, but in hindsight, afterwards, I knew that it was God's leading. because it wasn't only a few months later the company closed down, which would have meant that I would have been out without a job anyway.
So what did it feel like, you know, making that decision? You got a wife with 2 children. Yeah, how did that?
It was pretty tough because, as I said, they asked for my keys for my car. I had a company car. And the crazy thing was, it wasn't the day before we sold our car because it was just sitting in the garage devaluing.
No, you didn't have a car.
We had no car. So I was riding around in town on a 10-speed bike.
Well, there's benefits in that too.
Oh, yeah.
Get fit.
Yeah. But look, to be honest, it was actually a really good time in our life. Maxine had a hairdressing salon at home.
Mm-hmm.
I managed to secure some work at night pumping petrol at a service station. But we did that for about 6 months, and I said it was a really good time because I was able to spend time during the day. We were renovating a house, spend time with the family. But then I started feeling a bit guilty. I thought I really need to get a real job. And because of my experience in the photo processing industry, I secured a job managing a photo lab. The problem with that was it was in a mall. And I just spent the last, 15 odd years in a job where I was out and about. It'd be easy for me to drive 3,000 kilometres in a week, which is, I guess, nothing in Australia, but in New Zealand that's big.
That is big. You'd be going round and round.
Yeah. You know, as I said, one week I'd be at the top of the North Island, another week at the bottom of the South Island. And of course, here I was stuck in a shop, and been all those years just out and about. And drove me insane.
Did he drive you insane as well?
So how did you manage, Matt? He's away all this time, you know. How did you?
I don't mind my own company. The difference between, you know, short-term things and long-term things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So you managed?
Well, I used to manage the family finances back then anyway. You know, all of those sorts of things. It didn't. I'm not perturbed by, you know,
Good on you.
being by myself.
And having a husband then out of work?
Out of work was a bit of an issue, in the sense that, you know, like, because I had a salon, well, obviously I could pay my mortgage, but it was nothing for me to have to make lunches for 3 boys with 1 tomato, or, you know, my dad coming around saying, oh, what is that? And I'm going, potato skins, not the trendy potato skins you have today, but they were literally potato skins. And, you know, there was a time when we had 1 bucket of coal, and I'm going, in winter time, no, you can't use that. What if someone comes to visit on Sabbath? And we'll keep it for then. So we just wore our coats inside. And, you know, like, it's hard to understand that if you're an Australian, but if you live in the south of the south of New Zealand, you understand what I'm talking about. And one night Bruce said, oh, I can't stand it. I'm going to put the fire on. And so he went out to get that last bucket of coal, and our coal bin was full.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
It had been full for about 3 or 4 days, apparently. But it turns out Maxine's parents had coal delivered, and we didn't know.
Oh, isn't that precious?
You know what?
Yeah.
These experiences do 2 things. They either lead you towards God, because we're talking about prayer today. What was your experience with God then, and your experience in prayer when you're going through these hard times?
Yeah, for me, I think I knew God in a rules-based way, not in a really intimate relational way. So in those days, it's not that I denied the work of the Holy Spirit, but I was probably more practical-minded in a worldly sense. I was an Adventist for 20 years before I really became a Christian.
I can relate to that. We can have a brain knowledge
Yeah.
If
and
not.
know things, and we work in our own strength because that's what we've done. What we did before we knew God. But there has to be a change. You have to give it to God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
What
I
about
was
you?
always fiercely independent, so.
What about you, Bruce?
Well, like Maxine actually said, I really wasn't a true Christian at that point. You know, it was just something you did. You went to church. I went to church, took my children to church because I thought that was the right thing to do. It wasn't until way later in my life that I discovered who Jesus was.
You actually made it your own faith, and not the faith of your parents or your friends or whoever. It became your own.
I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do, because my parents did it, and I thought, I guess I was thinking back, I was probably doing it just to please my parents. I wasn't doing it for the right reason.
Well, let's go back, because you're now working in a photo processing industry in a shopping mall.
Yeah, and
And
as I
not
said,
getting
it
out.
drove me crazy. I just couldn't stand it. The owner of the photo lab had another shop up in the main part of the city, and they did. A good friend of mine actually was working there repairing cameras and lenses and photo equipment. So they moved me up to that shop, and I started repairing cameras, and because I was, I guess, technically minded, and so I spent the next 2 years repairing cameras and lenses and all sorts of photo.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah,
Getting into the nitty gritty of inside
Oh, it
camera
is.
stuff.
It's an intricate job. Cameras are pretty fine sort of equipment.
So you did that for 2 years.
2 years, and then because we were in that industry, we found out that there was around the corner a photographers / picture framing business. It had gone broke, and they were selling the stock and plant. So we naively bought a business.
So why do you use the word naive? Naively.
We were young, inexperienced, and we just thought it was a kind of cool thing to do, I suppose, as own your own business. Now, sadly, we bought bad will. Most businesses, you buy goodwill. And so Maxine was telling the story before about the potato skins. It was actually at this time that happened, because we spent probably the first year no income, virtually.
It was survival.
It was. Yeah, it wasn't a good time at all. But again, I believe God gives us these challenges to strengthen our faith in Him and just develop our characters. We learned so much through that time. It just makes you, I guess, work not only harder but smarter. And we learned a whole lot during that first year in business. But being a photography business, we bought it in 1989, and if you're old enough, you'll remember in the early 90s, that was sort of the advent of automatic cameras, when anyone could pick a camera up and take a half-decent photo. Before that, you needed to have a light meter and all sorts of stuff, and you needed to have a little bit of photographic knowledge to get something half-decent. So I could see the writing on the wall as far as professional photographers go, or for ones that weren't as good. And I didn't consider myself to be a really good photographer. I was okay, but there were other people in town that were better, and I acknowledged that. So we thought, what are we going to do here? The writing's on the wall for professional photographers, so I thought, hey, you know, people are going to now be taking lots of photos with these automatic cameras, so I thought they're going to be wanting picture frames. So we took the gamble. We gave our car, we employed a young girl, and I gave her a car and said, go and sell picture frames. And long story short, we ended up being one of the biggest frame manufacturers in New Zealand. We had a rep in the South Island and one in the North Island. We manufactured and made frames for like heaps of gift stores and department stores and things right through the country.
So you've got some good marketing going.
Yeah. So, and it was really good. And at that time, in 1993, I was able to actually fulfill one of Maxine's lifelong dreams. And for Christmas, I was able to give her not only a little brand new sports car, but a holiday for the family to Disneyland. And
I was going to say Disneyland for the family, Disneyland.
So yeah, look.
And it wasn't just out on the coast outside Invercargill.
No, this was the real one. In America, we went to Canada and America for a month. In fact, at that time, we were not only working hard in our business, we were also renovating houses. We didn't sleep too much. This particular house that we were doing, we took the kids there after work, and they were only young. Then we put them in a sleeping bag and take them home about 2, 3 in the morning, and then get up at 8 o'clock again, do it all again. We did that. We've renovated this one particular house in 2 weeks and put it on the market before we went to America, hoping that it would sell. It sold a week after we got home, which paid for our holiday, which was good.
And what paid for the sports car? What sort of sports car?
It was just a little
Honda CRX.
Yeah.
So-
it came with a big pink
So
ribbon on
you
it.
went through a difficult time.
That's really nice.
But then things changed. What do you think made it change?
Right. Well, that's where we get into the prayer.
Okay.
We have a graph, hopefully to show on the screen here. Now, I thought what I would do is I put an appointment on my computer at 9 o'clock every morning, and I called it my appointment with God.
Mm-hmm.
So every morning I would pray specifically for my business. So what happened after that?
When did you start doing that?
In 1993.
Okay.
We'd been in business
Since 89.
Since 89. And up until that point, business was pretty just ordinary. You know, it was just turning over, just average. It was just hard work, really. But you'll see on the graph here, in 1993, January, I started praying.
That's yellow.
And that's the yellow line you can see. The ones below it were all the years before.
Pretty straight, nothing.
Yeah, just average sort of turnover. So there I started praying, and you see at about August, it really just started blowing out of the water. But then it started going down again, and come November, I was looking at my graph and I thought, what's going on here? This is crazy.
Were you still praying during all this? You're still doing your 9 o'clock in the morning?
You'll notice I prayed into August, but when I got to November, I thought, why are we going
Things going down?
Dip? Yeah. And I thought, wow, I just realised we have been so busy, I've been ignoring my appointment with God in the morning. So I started praying again, and then it just, the graph just went right off the chart. So that, in my mind, is proof that God is real, because He answered my prayer.
But then all the other colours above the yellow, they're the following years.
They're the following years.
And it's just getting higher and higher.
Yeah. And so, yeah, business was really good. And I just, every time I look at that graph, I just think this is proof on paper that God is real.
So what did that experience, Maxine? You were handling the money, you said. What did that experience, how did that make you feel about God and prayer?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was more personal to Bruce at work. I handled the family income, so I didn't have anything to do with that financial part of the business because I'm a stressor.
I can see Bruce is very laid back though, aren't you?
That's why I'm a
Nothing
stressor.
phases you too much.
I'm pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so look, as I said, business is good. I even, at one point, we tied up, I don't know if New Zealanders will know the warehouse. It's not in Australia, but it's a big, it's like a Target type
Yeah.
store.
Mm.
It's right through the country. I tied up a deal with the warehouse to sell picture frames. Then they had 50 plus stores. And that meant that I would have had to gear up a whole new factory and everything just to supply the warehouse. But, and I started the wheels in motion to get all that happening, but I just felt that I shouldn't do it. I just had this, I don't know what it was. And I'm sure now looking back that it was God telling me, no, don't go there. So I pulled out of the deal, and it was only a couple of months later that the government, in its wisdom at the time, opened up China and allowed Chinese imports into the country. Now,
So you had the right intuition or the impression to get out. So
Yeah. So if I had gone through with that, I would have had a factory doing nothing and cost me my livelihood.
Yeah.
So I thank God for giving me, I guess, the knowledge to not go ahead and do that. Yeah, so that was where we got to with that. After that, fashions change in the industry. With the Chinese imports, we still had our New Zealand loyal gift shops and so forth, but we had a whole line of Rimu, which is a New Zealand timber, a whole line of gift items manufactured in Rimu, along with native timber picture frames, which obviously the Chinese couldn't produce. So we were still going all right with that, but it was more difficult with trying to compete with the Chinese market.
So you went into doing, what was the same day framing?
Yeah. At the time, it was the norm that, you would expect to take a week or two or even months sometimes to get your picture framing back. That's custom picture framing. And I just thought, well, the Gen X wants everything now. So my thoughts were, let's, do something to satisfy that. And so what we came up with, super framers, and we had same-day picture framing. Now, that was a whole new concept, and we got really busy, like I'm talking really busy. We had people lining up to get picture framing done at our shop. I remember one particular morning, I'm still praying to God each morning, and I prayed to God. This was a Friday, and I said, God, just give us heaps of work today. And that's that. I remember specifically, that's what I prayed.
You got to be careful when you pray that, Bruce.
Oh, absolutely. So, look, we got so busy that day. It was just ridiculous. Normally, we'd taken a job and we had a shelf. We had them all labelled the days of the week, Monday through to Friday, and we'd put it on that particular day because we were same-day picture framers. We had to do that work for that day. It was so busy that we didn't even have time to go and write them up, put them on the shelf, and they were just getting put out in the workshop. So the day ended, I shut the doors, went back out into the workshop, and I seen all these heaps of picture framing sitting around the workshop. They were just little piles for each customers, and I just had to laugh to myself. I just said to God, you've got a real sense of humour. I said, thanks for the heaps of work today.
Heaps in the workshop. Very, very good.
So you were successful, right?
Yes,
But then fashions changed again.
they did. You've got to always stay one step ahead of the market. Then we had and you'll remember at the stage where no frame was trendy. And you had
That's right, I remember that. Yeah.
just canvas prints and so forth. So what we did to try and keep up with that trend, we opened another shop. We called that Art and Soul, and it was a digital print shop. We printed large format printing. We also all that time we also did photo restoration and image manipulation, which so that helped to sort of combat that problem in the market. Yeah.
So what happened though? Because there was a time when you had trouble paying wages.
We did. Well, that really, I had the money, but it was all out in debtors, as people in business will know. The money go round wheel stopped. And it come payday, and I looked at the bank account and I had not enough to pay my staff. And that's a scary feeling. You think, well, you know, how can we not pay somebody for their worth, not what they've done during the week? And so all I could do was pray. So I just asked God, I said, God, I don't have the money here, I need your help. What can we do? And I not only just finished the prayer, my phone rang. Straight after, like I'm talking 1 second, my phone rang and it was somebody said, Bruce, I owe you some money. What's your bank account? And so I gave him a bank account, and you know what? The money was exactly to the cent that my wage bill was for that day.
You know, that's an incredible testimony, because I can relate to that too, and I'm sure there are many Christians out there who can do the same. But it's true. God gives you what you need, you know, and if you just call upon Him, He does provide.
If you're being faithful to God, He will work for you. Yeah.
So then there, you know, things are going. Something happened in 2000. What was it? 2007.
No. What happened in 1994?
1994. Yeah, I had an accident at work. I was making a rather large frame on the guillotine. It was bigger than the measurements on the bed of the guillotine, and I'd drawn a pencil line on the rebate of the frame, and I was taking shavings back, and I did something a little bit naughty. One of our guillotines was pneumatically operated, and of course you have to have both your hands out to hold the buttons to keep them away from the blades. Well, I put my arm across the buttons and was pushing the frame back in, and I cut my fingers off my hand. All of the fingers right through here.
In your right hand.
Yeah, and I'm right-handed, so that was pretty devastating.
So you got some surgery.
Yeah, they've put a finger back on to one knuckle, which is the middle knuckle. They did pretty amazing. There was 9 hours of surgery. Yeah, so that was, but I took a week off work for that.
Just a week. So what did you think when he came, you know, when you found out that he'd cut some fingers off?
Well, actually they told me that he'd cut a finger off. I was at work. I actually went straight out the back and threw up. And then I couldn't go straight to the hospital. I had to get myself together in my head. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone in a plane to Christchurch.
Oh, okay.
So a nurse had to go and hold his bag all the way there, because they went in a small plane. It wasn't till the next day that I actually got away to go up there. Yeah,
a few hours drive.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I had spoke to the doctors at the hospital. I think they actually were more worried about me than him, because I never said a word. Just because they told me 3 fingers when I got there.
Very sad. So after you'd done that and recovered, what else happened? Because John mentioned, what, 2003?
2007.
2007.
Yeah. 2007, if you remember, the world went a bit nuts. It was the global financial crisis. Now, you remember we're in a business that really is reliant on disposable income. You don't need a picture on the wall if you haven't got food on the table or petrol in your car.
Especially if it's a picture of fruit or something.
Yeah. So it really affected our business. And, you know, I used to ask people all the time, really what's changed for you? You know, people still had jobs and everything, but it's the media that creates the problem. And people were just scared. They stopped spending. And so, as I said, it affected our business quite badly. And it was a difficult time. You know, up until then, we would take on probably average of about 20 jobs a day, and it went down to 1 to 3, just basically overnight. So yeah, it was hard.
Then you had health issues.
Yeah, well, at the same time, our church, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but it was Invercargill Church was a guinea pig church. They trialled what was called the Growing Healthy Churches program in our Invercargill Church, and it wasn't pleasant. It was very unpleasant, actually. So coupled with the global financial crisis and what we're going through at church, it was a really stressful time, and I ended up having 4 heart attacks over a 17-day period. I'm lucky to be here.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
We have a friend that worked on the ambulance, and when she found out, she said to Maxine that she was surprised that I was still alive, because everyone she attended, someone of my age, was normally in a box.
And you had 4.
So, I mean, you must be laying in hospital. What are you thinking about? Talking to God? What's going on?
Well, over that period of time, the morning that I had my first heart attack, I didn't know it at the time, but my sister called Maxine and said that my father had died that same morning.
She had wanted to speak to Bruce, and I went, I've just put him in an ambulance. And she went, what? And she said, Dad just died. And I went, oh. And I went, well, don't tell your mum that what's happened to Bruce. I'll go and make sure I know what's happening first. So, like, we weren't expecting him to die. He was elderly, he was in care, but he wasn't, it wasn't a thing, it just happened.
That was my first.
About the same time that Bruce had his heart attack.
Exactly, at the same time.
Amazing.
This was kind of bizarre. But yeah, look, we ended up going to Dad's funeral in Blenheim, which is the other end of the South Island.
Yes.
And I had another heart attack after the funeral.
So you battled with God over all of this?
Yeah, well, look, I ended up having 2 Westpac helicopter rides and a life flight plane ride. Through all this, I realised that I had a battle going on for my life. I'm convinced of that. In the hospital, in Blenheim Hospital, I had an experience where I had chest pains that were coming and going, and I could feel it's really hard to describe. The room felt dark and cold, and I felt that coming and going, and along with my chest pains. And I just felt impressed to cry out to God, and I just said out loud to God, I said, get the devil out of this room. And as soon as I did that, there was instant peace. The heart tension left the room, that cold, dark feeling in the room left, and there was peace. So that was, again,
an amazing event.
Yeah.
Oh, really, that would have been interesting. We've got a couple of photos to show of a building that you had been planning to buy.
Yeah, this was the building.
Bank building. It's a big building.
It's a beautiful old building. It was previously bank, and we called. That's where we housed our art gallery. It was called the Bank Art Gallery, And we actually wanted to buy that building. It made sense for us to own that building, and so we put in an offer to buy the building. The offer was straight away turned down. They just said a blatant no. We found out about 2 weeks later that it sold for less than we had offered.
Amazing.
So again, I was just questioning God. I said, God, why? I couldn't understand that. But there was a reason that God wanted us to stay there.
And you just ended up saying to God, I give up.
Well, yeah, I did. One morning I just prayed and I just said, God, I surrender everything to you. Take it all. I said, you know, you take my house, my car, my business, my heart, my soul, my money, just take it all. And things changed after that.
You surrendered
Yeah,
instead of trying to do it yourself.
that's right. Our life totally changed after that.
Because we've got a picture of your house in Invercargill and the beautiful view from it. You had a lovely home.
We did. God blessed us. We had that lovely home. We had a unique property. It was
Lovely view.
5 acres of scenic bush behind us. We had a view of the river. We to the north we could see the Takatima Mountains. To the south we had at Stewart Island we could see. God truly blessed us. We had like 5 cars, a couple of BMWs and a motorbike and all sorts of toys.
And yet you said, Lord, take it
Take
all.
it all. Yeah.
Do with it what you want.
Yeah. And I said to him, I'll do whatever you want. I'll go wherever you want. Just.
Did you know that he did this?
I didn't really. I've heard it a number of times. We kind of discussed it, but not perhaps as blatantly as that, because I don't like change. You know, I like everything to be as it is. You know, I like to know that I've got some money in the bank for a rainy day. I'm a control freak.
Well, on the note of a control freak, I would like to change pace because we need to go to our address roll. We have had Bruce. He has just given his everything to God. God, you take control. And Maxine wants to be in control. So this juncture, if you want to contact us at all, we ask you to contact us on these details because we'd love to hear from you.
If you would like to contact 3ABN Australia, you may do so in the following ways. You may write to 3ABN Australia, PO Box 752, Morisset, New South Wales 2264, Australia. Or you may call 02 4973 3456. That's 02 4973 3456. You may also email us at mail@3abnaustralia.org.au. That's mail@3 ABNaustralia, all one word, .org.au. Thank you for all you do to help us light the world with the glory of God's truth.
I hope you wrote down those details because we really love to hear from our viewers and our listeners on radio. We're talking with Bruce and Maxine Hill, and we are coming to the close of the program, so we've got to get to the end of your story. You've just put everything on the line to God.
I did.
You've surrendered everything. Maxine doesn't know you've done it, but you've got a beautiful home in Invercargill, a wonderful view, and you're willing to go wherever God wants you to go. What did God do?
Long story short, he prompted me to take some Bible study lessons at church. Now, in the finding out your spiritual gifts, the least of my spiritual gifts is teaching. But he wanted me to take some Bible studies, so I did that. And through that, I had to read the Bible. And I'd come to know Jesus as my Saviour. Just because I was forced to, but God led me there.
Yeah, and you grew.
I did. And also at church, we were running a mission program. One Sunday morning, we had a gentleman come. His name was Gabriel, and I shared with him our story, and he handed me the Record magazine. In that was an ad for a job for a couple at Crosslands. Now I wouldn't not normally have read that, but I found the ad. We applied for the job at Crosslands, and we ended up selling a house, our business. The house sold in 2 weeks twice, and our business, I got a phone call to say, is my business for sale? And it sold for a cash buyer, no agent fees.
And you got the job.
Yeah.
So you moved to Australia, to Sydney.
Yeah.
So
Very
just
different to Invercargill.
Very quickly, Maxine, what's Crosslands and what work did you come to do? Because we want to put up an email address for people who want to go and visit you.
Okay, so Crosslands is for young people, families,
Churches.
schools. We do outdoor activities. There's lots of complementary activities that people can come and use at their leisure.
Accommodation.
Accommodation, camping. We pretty much provide everything that a family would need for a weekend away.
That's a beautiful
And this
picture.
is your view now from your house.
We are, yes.
God gave you a beautiful view. Office at crosslands.org.au for people who want to find out more information. It's crosslands.org for the website.
Yep.
Correct, yes.
And so contact them. If you're anywhere in the Sydney, New South Wales area, it's a beautiful place.
It is.
And God has taken you on a journey to another country with a completely different job, and that's where your verse, Jeremiah 29:11, came in, because you didn't know, why did you bring us here? But has God shown you in that time?
He's blessed us in a lot of ways. Yeah, we've learned a lot since we've been here.
And you've made it a place where people can meet Jesus, and that's the wonderful thing about it. Thank you both for being here, because I've enjoyed meeting you and talking with you today. And I am sure that you have been blessed by hearing their stories. Prayer works because God is real.
Absolutely.
And that's what Bruce has found. So God bless you. Till next time.